As the guys are still come into the room, welcome everybody. Welcome everyone to come into the room. I'll just give a bit of an outline, I guess, in a moment before I start. As you know, this topic might be, new, or it might be a different angle from what people have heard before. So the first thing that I just want to say is obviously welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for spending the afternoon or the evening, wherever you are with me. But I do just want to make it very clear that before we begin, that this isn't about religion. It's most certainly not about belief. It's not a recruiting for anything to do with religious. This is all around about consciousness. However, for myself, I've studied quite a lot in psychology, a lot of sacred scrolls. I've traveled a lot and a lot of lived experience. So this isn't coming from a religious background. This is coming from a consciousness, psychology, lived experience, and sort of traveling the world and picking up things that I've learnt along the way. But what I'm going to use for the purpose of tonight to help people understand it and to understand consciousness through it is I am going to use Jesus, or Yeshua, as most people would probably know Jesus as the example. And I'm going to use the Holy Bible as the framework. A couple of reasons for that. That would be the thing that we'd be most familiar with in the Western world. The Bible is also, the backbone to society as we know it, to the Western world. It is what we use in courtrooms. It does determine our laws. It really is our moral compass. And it's a lot of truth. For anyone that might be new to anything with the Bible, I'll just give you a little bit of an understanding of it, that the Bible's not really a book. It's more like a library. And that library has been collated over, 1,500 odd years, really, from all different scrolls, people's perceptions. There's things, that have even come from emerald tablets, green tablets that are in there, things from, Book of Enoch, Keys of Enoch. There's stuff associated with letters that people had witnessed things, what they had seen. You've got your Old Testament, your New Testament, so sort of before Jesus was born and after. And I always find it interesting for anybody that's, might be skeptical about Jesus from my personal opinion is, what year are we in? And why is it 2026? So hands down, Jesus is the most recorded, probably the most controversial as well too. Um, definitely, definitely someone that can be misunderstood, and definitely there has been a lot of books that, well, within the Bible, when you kind of collate the Bible, there's a lot of things that don't get included for different reasons. And it's not so much a conspiracy, things being kept. I'm sure there's parts to that, but a lot of the time is it's around about making sure that information's at a point where the general consensus of consciousness of humans that are on the earth at the time can comprehend. So for people that may have picked up a Bible, I've had a lot of emails coming through the last couple of weeks just around some of the decoded stuff and using the Bible. And one thing that's been very clear is I'm aware that a lot of people struggle to read it, and so do I, because it's not a book, so it's not a start to finish. So understand it's a library. There's a bunch of wisdom in there. Understand that there has been different translations of it. There has been different languages of it. There are different versions of it. But for the purpose for tonight, to keep it nice and simple and nice and clean for everybody, I will go on the King James version, which is the most common one that we utilize. Now, this is not, again, about me trying to convert anyone to anything. This is really just an opportunity for you to be witness, to maybe hear a bit of a different perspective around some things. I encourage you to take what serves you, and if it doesn't serve you, then just leave it. But it's really just around about exploration, because we are in a beautiful time right now. A lot of the time we can identify what the chaos is, but on a spiritual level, we are at an incredible time where we have got the ability to do some pretty amazing things. And some of that stuff is clear in multiple karmas from previous lifetimes. There's definitely opportunities to break reincarnation cycles at the moment. There's opportunities to do big quantum leaps in consciousness. And that'll make more sense to you in a moment as I kind of talk over the next, 60 minutes. So I just encourage you to listen, take what you want to take, leave what you want, and just explore. And I think that if there's some things that I say, it won't feel, if there's things that I say that you're aligned with, it should feel more like remembering than anything. It won't really feel like information. So just pay attention to what you feel, in the mind, what you kind of feel in the heart as well too, and just see how you kind of respond, as I roll through. So Yeshua, or Jesus, I'm going to pull throughout these slides. I've got about 30 or 40 slides in here for everybody. And I am going to use a scroll on each one because it's a good opportunity to do a little bit of decoding as well too. So First and foremost, the real mission. So, from the scroll of Luke, the kingdom of God cometh not with observation, neither shall they say, Lo here or lo there, for behold, the kingdom of God is within you. Now, when Jesus, when Yeshua came here, he literally redirected the search for God away from institutions. Now, this is not anti-church by any means, but we're at a stage of like a level 4 or a tier 4 consciousness where we didn't have to go outside of ourselves to try and find God because God was within us. So when Jesus came here, he was literally trying to take people away from the institutions, not so much scout people from the institutions, but let them be aware that they did not need the institutions to access God and to access that Christ consciousness. So what he was really doing was trying to point directly to human consciousness. Now, be aware as well, too, that, Jesus, that how you probably envision him at the moment is probably not what he looked like. He wasn't, I don't believe anyway, I don't believe that he was a skinny, white, frail character. I believe he would have been embodied with light. He would have been glowing. He would have been shining. He would have been, super healthy, super fit. He would have been incredible. So obviously things do happen over times, but to me, that's how I've perceived it. That's how I've seen it from things I've learned from where I've been. So imagine just Jesus being that nice light body spectrum. So the reason why he was like that was because Jesus embodied and carried the Christos or the Logos. So he already had the Christ energy within him. He already had God alive. He had the flame alive within him because it's really a frequency is really what it is. So, higher consciousness or God or Christos is really a frequency that we hold. Now, Jesus, not only did he embody it, but he also had the vessel to hold it. So he had he had the ability to hold it. And what I mean by that is that we can hold on to so many things that don't serve us, like past thoughts, past memories, past emotions. There's things that we can hold on to. So it doesn't allow us to really embody the frequency of Christ because we've got too much going on. And Jesus was a prime example of somebody that didn't hold on to the things, everything was a teacher to him. All emotions were teachers. He learnt from that, but he didn't hold the space. So he had the vessel to do it. So the kingdom was never somewhere else. It was always in that inner awakening. So it was always within ourselves once we start to lift the veil. So this presentation, again, is not about learning new beliefs. It's really just for me to kind of highlight things about recognizing things that are already alive within you that may just need to be reactivated. And that reactivation I'll explain as we go through. It's a lot simpler than what people realize because the journey really does begin inwards. So you've got an invitation at the moment to hear, as Matthew, or in the scroll of Matthew says, he that hath ears to hear, let him hear. So you're here for curiosity. So I'm here to share my wisdom with you. So the first thing is that truth cannot be forced into somebody, and understanding that truth is really the backbone. And this is why the Bible is so solid. This is what you put on your hand in a courtroom, because it is truth. Really, truth it can only really be recognized for people that want to learn, that want to listen behind the habit and the noise, because sometimes the truth can be very disrupting to people. It can be very uncomfortable for people because it takes them out of the comfort zone. So it can be challenging. I'd imagine a lot of people that are in this audience that are on the webinar tonight will probably be familiar with that during COVID, as an example, trying to share some truth, some things to people, and probably didn't get really received that well. So awakening really begins when the attention becomes intentional. And this was another thing, I guess, with COVID as well, too, that I think a lot of people woke up in COVID because the simple fact is they had to stop. Like they had to stop. They had no other choice but to stop and to sit. So in that moment, allowed the inner work to happen. There's polarity to everything that happens. I think it was probably a good thing in the big picture because it did awaken a lot of people. And then we would start to do things a little bit more intentionally. People started to do things very different. And you might be someone that's been living like this for a long time, but a high majority of people the last 5 or 6 years really woke up to this. Now, the thing that we do know is that truth is constant. And that is really what we do find in the Bible, is we do find truth in the Bible. But reality is really interpreted. And that can also be the way that we might perceive the Bible, because my reality may be different to your reality, from upbringings, from people that we've been around, from where we've learnt from, from where we've seen things, from what tier of consciousness or what stage of consciousness we were in. So a good embodiment practice, and I'm putting embodiment practice on each one of these slides, is to just listen without trying to agree or disagree. That's a real big step in awakening. Just listen without trying to agree or disagree. Just listen to perceive and just kind of see what that person's perception, because awakening really starts with willingness. So we have to be willing to see the other side of things and not be that know-it-all. Now, in Psalms, we talk about the world of distraction. So be still and know that I am God. Now, modern life is structured to keep the mind like absolutely relentless, right? Along with that hustle culture. So we always think that more is better. The more we do, the better we get. But we also live in the world too, where mobile phones can go off 24/7. You can be asleep and you can wake up and you've got your messages and your emails and everything else that's always just playing in your mind. So the mind can be very, very, very busy. But what's important, for our consciousness growth and to connect with God is that stillness is not laziness. It's the doorway to perception. So we need to have stillness. And that's very difficult in the world that we live in these days. Because without having that, without our silence, then everything just gets drowned. Like the truth gets drowned. We can't have that connection. So a good embodiment practice here is to create moments daily where you just don't have anything that's demanded of you. You don't need to be anywhere. You don't need to do nothing. And also not consuming anything, social medias, foods, whatever it may be. Find that moment of meditation, prayer, just stillness, even at the end of the day, right? And you'll probably find if that's new to you, you'll probably find that you feel guilty. I know even to this day, I still do that. I have multiple days now where I don't do anything because I want to connect closer with myself and find more truth and, work on my own consciousness growth. And I still to this day do that, but I'm aware that's just an emotion that I feel, which is really from like a past belief, which is coming from what, society kind of pushed into me at a younger age of the hustle culture. So I encourage you to create daily moments where nothing is demanded of you because the stillness really reveals what the noise hides. And it's in those moments where we have those aha moments. And it's those aha moments which are really our growth moments. Now, the ache beneath success that for what shall it profit a man if he shall gain the whole world and lose his own soul? Now, this is a big one where we can get away from ourselves. We can get away from our own consciousness because achievement without the alignment just produces emptiness. We're going to have multiple awards and trophies and cars and houses and all the rest of it. But if we don't have that inner alignment, we're always going to feel empty. We're going to feel like we need more. We're going to try and find what that is. There's a gap, there's a hole to fill. Because many people do succeed outwardly, but they literally starve themselves inwardly. So be mindful, our family, our friends, this also works for our inner world. It's not just about being selfish for ourselves, but doing the things that nurture the soul, not just what the rest of the world, not just competing with your next door neighbor or whatever it might be, but really, giving that fuel to the soul for what the soul needs. Because the soul cannot be replaced by success. It is that simple. It just cannot. So a good embodiment here is to, measure your life by your meaning, not by your accumulation. Now, beyond the religious image, and I think this is a really powerful one in Mark, and if you just sit with it for a moment, it makes a lot more sense. But the Sabbath was made for man and not man for Sabbath. Now, just sit there with that for a moment. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. So what we was really trying to do, Jesus was in this scenario, he was not building an external empire. He was just trying to reveal an inner revolution and the inner revolution that we all can have. His message was nothing to do with control. Like, I mean, Jesus didn't have a church, right? He didn't make anyone do anything. He was all about awakening is what he was about. So don't search outward. If you are, don't search outward for anything that must be awakened inward because Jesus was just pointing to consciousness. It wasn't compliance. And for anybody that's been around churches and stuff, I'm not having a dig at your churches in any way, shape, or form, but we've evolved a long way. I mean, you think about it, 2000 odd years ago now, 2025 years ago, we went through this process and it was to, Jesus was trying to tell people that you just need to go within. You need to stop the distraction, bring the silence, and come closer to God. So we don't need the buildings, but if they serve you, then they serve you. But the awakening is inward. Now, the embodied truth, and the word was made flesh and dwelt among us full of grace and truth. So divine truth is not meant to be admired from a distance. It's something in which we're meant to be lived, right? Because Jesus embodied what others only spoke about. So everything's experiential. So we've got to experience these things. And an important thing is to live your beliefs through your actions, but not through your language. So it's not what you say you're going to do, it's what you do, right? Because truth becomes real when it becomes lived. We have to carry it out. We have to have that experience as when it becomes lived. Now, here's a really good one, and this is probably one of my favorite scrolls, like hands down in the Bible. And not many people are familiar with this one. And if you really understand this one, this will absolutely change your whole life because this is embodied truth under pressure. So we can have our truth that we feel that we have, but the moment that we might get a bit of a push or a shove, then we might retreat, we might fall back into our ego for our safety, and we might not hold that truth. So this one is from Matthew, and there's a little bit to the story here, and I'll just give you the scroll first, and I'll tell you a bit about the story. Um, Actually, I'll tell you the story first. So the story is effectively Jesus was there with the disciples, and Julius Caesar sent the Herodians down, went down to see Jesus and asked Jesus the question basically of, here comes the man of God. He's not swayed by what anybody tells him. He knows what he believes. So let us ask you a question, Jesus. In your opinion, is it right to pay imperial tax to Caesar or not? So Jesus kind of knew that it was a trap because it was a political trap. Jesus really navigated the dilemma through his truth because if he rejected Rome and then he was going to risk execution, or support Rome, and he was going to lose that spiritual authority. So what he done is he chose neither, and he asked them to show them the denaro that he wanted to pay. So they pull out the gold coin, and he asked them, well, whose inscription was that? And Caesar's, they said. And that's where Jesus says, well, therefore, render therefore unto Caesar's the things which are Caesar's, and unto God the things that are God. So in a nutshell, what that really meant, he was saying, well, give to the government, give to the Roman Empire what's the Roman Empire's, but give to God what is God's. So he didn't get put under the pressure because he knew his truth. He knew what he stood for, but he was also conscious enough and wise enough not to fall for the trap because it really was a trap. And the more that we get enlightened and become more like the example that Jesus was of a fully embodied consciousness, well, this is when we can hold our own. We don't fall into fear when things get tough. When we get challenged with authority, as an example, we don't fall into fear from that because we are embodying the truth. We know what we stand for, we know where it's at. Because the embodied truth really is the anchor in, a higher allegiance. So we refused to panic, Jesus did. He didn't collapse into the fear and he didn't dominate under pressure. So this is a good embodiment practice. And this one can be really difficult for people, but being aware that when your identity is rooted in truth, then external systems do not control your inner posture. So what happens on the outside shouldn't affect the inside. You want to stay strong on the inside, embody that truth. And that's a prime example right there of what Jesus was doing. So, quick little touch on this. I'm going to dive into it a bit more. So, the Ekklesia, one of the topics for tonight. Well, what is it? It's the called out assembly. In Matthew, it says, and I say also unto thee that thou art Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Now, where this was really coming from was this was from Apostle Paul. So really what had happened within here is Apostle Paul was, somebody that didn't really believe when Jesus was about. And then after Jesus, he really adopted and he understood that, yes, Jesus was the Christ. So what he's really doing here is he's saying that, he's going to build that. So once it says the rock, it means more of a foundation. So build something solid on the foundation doesn't necessarily mean the physical rock, but a solid foundation. And the word church in here actually means ecclesia. So understand that when Jesus was here, he was trying to wake up the ecclesia. He was trying to raise the consciousness. He was trying to raise the called out assembly. So the conscious beings, the people that were choosing to be conscious and to bring them together. He was really trying to encourage people to be a part of the participation is what he was trying to do. And to be a part of the participation is when we've really got to start to embody that truth. And we need to connect with like-minded people as well. So the ecclesia is what Jesus was here to try and awaken. And ecclesia was previously the word that was used in sacred scrolls until it has been changed to church. So a way that I like to describe it to people in like a modern day time would be the church is kind of the building, if you think of it like that, and the people inside the church, well, that's the ecclesia, the vibration, the awakened ones, the conscious ones, the ones in living in higher vibrations. So a good embodiment here is to, to answer the call to live awake. And I wouldn't believe that anyone that's on this webinar right now wouldn't already be awakened on some level. That's the reason why you're here, right? Now, the sacred moves inside. So know ye not that ye are the temple of God and that the Spirit of God dwelleth in you. So the sacred relocated into the human being. So the temple is no longer perceived as stone because we have all evolved as a collective consciousness. Even for those that are quite consciousness, and there's many people not that long ago, 5 or 6 years ago, that hadn't even welcomed consciousness or wasn't even aware the veil hadn't been lifted for them at that point. So we've got a lot of people now. So now it is being understood as consciousness. So we're starting to understand that. Now, it's super important that you treat your body and your mind as holy ground because your body is the vessel that's going to carry that. So you literally carry the sanctuary. Now, here's from the 16th chapel, Michelangelo. I'll give you a quick little code on this one. So as you can see here, on the left-hand side would represent what Adam is. On the right-hand side, you've got what we perceive as God to be. And if you pay close attention to it, you just have a good little look at that, you'll start to realize that on the right-hand side where God is, well, God is inside the brain right there. And that is, the pineal gland. Consciousness is what's represented of God right here. So we've often found, in stages of consciousness where we've evolved from, or we've really believed it's like a physical being as such. Well, it's not, it's the collective consciousness. God is that. Now you can also see here with Adam on the left-hand side where Adam's hand sort of hanging down, and you can see that the image of God has got the finger pointing right out. What this really resembles here is the free will to be conscious or not. So we've all got a choice that we make in our life. Like we choose whether we want to be conscious or not. And most of the time, the things that bring us into consciousness, unless you've had, good mentors, a good upbringing of a lot of wisdom around you, most of the time when we wake up is when we actually wake up to the Babylonian system, like the matrix. Matrix meaning Babylonian system, and Babylonian coming from the word Babel, which means confusion. So we're quite confused because we don't have control of our attention, is what we don't have. So when we come hold of our attention, well, that's when we can start to control our energy, and that's when we lift the veil, and that's when we start to wake up. So this is really representing that we have a free will, a choice, whether we want to be conscious or not. And I'm sure that everybody on here would agree with me that life is probably much easier when you're unconscious, right? But what's the point of being here if you're unconscious? Sometimes I must admit, sometimes I put my hand up and I say, I wish I didn't know, and I wish I didn't see, and I wish I didn't embody things the way that I do, because you just want to switch off sometimes. But it's it's part of the process, it's part of the evolution. So moving forward, consciousness evolves in stages, right? So as it says in Corinthians, but we all are changed into the same image from glory to glory. So human consciousness evolves in predictable stages. We know that. We know that it's predictable. This is why history repeats itself, right? In so many ways. Growth is absolutely not random. It follows what we call a spiral dynamic. So it's a spiral pattern is what it is. Now, what Jesus was really doing when he was here was Jesus was demonstrating what the full arc of development is. So what the full arc of going all the way up to the spiral is. Now, as I talk through these ones, just an embodiment or a practice for you in the moment, because I will touch on these, just recognize you are without any judgment in any way. And also just recognize, where society is as well too, without any judgment. Because growth really does follow structure. We know that when we set goals, we move towards it, we achieve it, we set it again. So we do need structure when we talk around about our growth. So quick little look at here. This is an Ekklesia model, and you can dive deeper into this if you haven't already watched it. On the homepage at I'm Awakening, there's a three-part series there with myself and Steve McDonald that you can dive into. But what I will do is just give you a quick brief look at it, and I'll quickly go through each one and help you understand the role that Jesus sort of played within this. So down the bottom is our instinct survival. This is when we first come into the world. You can see on the left-hand side that you've got your communal orientation. So this is when we're a part of community, when we're a part of, effectively involved in community. We're a part of the team. On the right-hand side is when we go into our individual orientation. So it's when we become about ourselves because we're doing the work for ourselves. Now, what Jesus was really representing here was a character that had gone through all the levels of it. Now, being aware that, 2000 odd years ago, where we were not as conscious as a collective as we are at the moment, right? So we're more around that tier four is really where we were. And we've been there for a long time is really where we were. And as you'll see in a moment, tier four is all about rules, it's about rules, and rules are important because we need to have structure again so we can progress. But this is what the whole line, and this is what Tesla talks about with 369. Because what happens through this model as we progress to it, if we progress to it, it doesn't happen to anyone and everyone. It's something that takes, work, and you've got to invest into it to grow through it. But a good way to think of it is it's almost like if you're at one tier, it's like you get a membership for life. So don't think of it as something that you go from one to two and you've completed level one, you stay in level two, and then you go to two to three, and then you stay in level three, you don't fall back, because that's not accurate. It's a spiral dynamic. So we can move up and we can move down at any given time. And what Jesus really resembled was somebody who had gone through all the stages of all of this. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about this and I'll come back to it. So the instinct to survive is really our tier one. So the very bottom one. Oh, and sorry, just quickly, I will just highlight, you'll see in the middle, that's the divine. So how close we are to consciousness, how close we are to the collective, how close we are to God, the source, however you word it. So tier one in the Eclat one is the instinct to survive. So, and the children of Israel murmured, for ye have brought us forth into this wilderness to kill the whole assembly with hunger. So this is like the survival stage where life is ruled by fear and basic needs. A lot of people fell into COVID, like fell right down into it. This is primarily where when we come into the world, when we need somebody to feed us, we need somebody to bath us, we need somebody to, to clothe us, to look after us, complete care. So the important thing for us to move away from the instinct to survival, which is really, that lower root chakra, is that the nervous system, it needs to have safety before it can have meaning, right? So the nervous system looks for safety and then it can actually have meaning. So tier one down the bottom. So I would encourage people always, and we don't just go from point A to point B in life, right? Like we're always going up and down. We're going around the spiral. We're going back. We're going forward. There's multiple things that are happening. So there may be times where we fall in there. I've definitely had moments where I thought I was fearless and I was beyond it, and things had happened and made me fall back into fear. So I would encourage, if you're ever in those situations, just to create that physical and emotional stability first before you can do anything, because we need that safety from the tier one. So the fear really must settle for us to allow it to awaken. So sometimes for people, as they move on that awakening journey, it can be a little bit rigid, and it can be a little bit here, there, and everywhere, because there's the underlying fear that keeps on drawing people back down to the number one. So this must be settled before we can move forward. In our two, and this is another thing I started to see a lot of, and I still see a lot of on the back of the COVID as well too. We kind of fell quite low after this COVID, but this is safety in the tribe, which is Eclat 2. So, and all that believed were together. So the tribal stage seeks belonging. This is when we want to have our people. We want to be a part of something. We want to have ritual. And the identity really comes from the group. So it's the group is really where the identity is. Now, it's important for us to be in this with the tribe. So honor your community is my embodiment tip. To honor your community, whatever communities that you're in, you're probably in multiple, but don't lose your individuality in it. Make sure that you stay who you are. So just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean you have to do it. Just because everybody else thinks something doesn't mean you have to. You don't have to fit in with that, because it's important that you have your own consciousness with your own beliefs. So belonging is like a foundation. So it's a good place for it to be. It's a good place for safety, but it's not a prison. So we shouldn't stay within there. We should definitely evolve, and we can come back to it, back and forth. But here's a good one. The rise of the ego. So this is when we first sort of really come over to our individual growth. So though I shall die with thee, yet will I not deny thee. I know not the man. Now, this is a scroll from Matthew, but it's actually around about Peter. And it's around the sense that, he believes that, believes that that Jesus is the Son of God, that he is the Christ that was within there, says that he's going to back him up. He'll be with him. I'll die with you. I support you. You're my boy. I'm 100% aligned. And then once Jesus, gets arrested and starts to face the crucifixion, well, he doesn't makes out like he doesn't know him, right? So he falls away. So the ego stage seeks dominance and self-preservation. So in that regard, it was kind of like the fear overtook again. And he fell back because Peter was somebody that, really represents, sorry, it's Peter, not Paul, somebody that really represents the unstable ego trying to prove itself. So when he makes these comments to Jesus, he's trying to like show his worth. And I've done this many a times in my life before, where you try and prove your worth by saying things to people. And then when something happens, you're like, oh, you kind of put to the test of it. It's like, well, do I really believe this, or was it something that I was saying to try and fit in, maybe? Was it something I was saying to try and stand out potentially as well too? So ego is really quite loud in devotion, but it's fragile when it's threatened. Um, this was another thing. I hate to keep going into COVID, but just as it comes to mind, this was another thing that I'd seen in my personal life. Some really good friends that were so rock solid. The moment that COVID came, I would never have thought they would have folded as quickly as they did because they needed to protect the ego. They needed to make sure that they had the house, they paid the car, they kept the bills being paid, whatever it might be. So just being aware of these things, a good embodiment practice here is just notice where pride might take over truth or it starts to replace truth, or where pride starts to challenge you truth. Obviously, we want to stay within truth, yeah? So consciousness really matures when our identity is no longer reactive. So when we don't react to things, that shows that our consciousness is starting to mature. When we start to look at things from, a couple of different perceptions, so we're not necessarily the ones that are right. We're open to hearing things from other people because very rarely are we actually right. As a collective, we're right, but very rarely as an individual are we right. Now, your number four, this is an interesting one. So number four on the ECLED is wow unto you scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites. So what this is about, stage four, tier four, which is probably very much where we are at the moment. This is when it's a rule-based stage. So we need certainty through law. Now, religion can become rigid when structure replaces spirit. And what I mean by that is the image which I've done on the left over here is that you can see, the columns, some tablets with some scrolls and things like that. It's very built, it's very rigid, it's very solid, it's strong. But you can see that they'll put the light throughout that, right? So it shows that the light is still within there, yeah? So this is what I mean by when religion becomes rigid, when we replace the structure with spirit. So it's good to be, a structure and moral authority is okay, but we must make sure that the spirit stays within it. And I think we could probably all agree that's the challenge that we're all facing at the moment, because we really are in a tier four at the moment. We were in a tier five, which I'll explain in a moment, and we have to take one step back before we take two steps forward. And this is why we're seeing so many rules in our society, especially in Australia at the moment, right? More rules because we're in that tier four. Now, you want to use discipline, as a scaffolding because discipline is a good thing. Rules is really discipline, right? It is a good thing, but you never want to allow it to be a cage. So we never want to get locked into that. We've got to be able to be outside of the box and feel and think outside of the box as well. Because law, again, without that spirit, becomes the oppression, which is a big part of what a lot of people in this country, are feeling at the moment for sure. So structure should support growth, but it should never suffocate it. And that's when we start to feel like we're losing ourselves, we're losing our freedoms because we are getting suffocated by the structure, by the rules. Now, your tier five is success and mastery. Now, this is where I believe that we were pre-COVID. And again, I hate going back to COVID, but it's a really good example. And this is, as Matthew says, for where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. So when we talk about a tier five, it really is around about achievements because we're back to ourself again. It's an achievement consciousness, I should say. We're about the success, we're about status, we're about innovating, we're doing new things, we're kind of making our own rules and living by our own rules and falling down into a public sector of rules. It really does build civilizations, but it can risk emptiness because the ego can become present because it's very easy for us to fall back down into the ego. So, and a good embodiment around this is to pursue excellence without abandoning your soul. So take your soul with you, because success without meaning is hollow. Now, this is very much where we were, the capital, the consumer. I'm sure everybody can agree. We've taken that one step back to that last one I just spoke about at the moment. But where we are going, and this is really, really, really important, and probably the backbone to why I wanted to put this presentation, this webinar together. Where we will go, and some people are already there now, where we will go is we will go into tier six. And this is when the heart starts to awaken. So this is when we get out of our head and we start to make our way to our heart, which, the longest journey that we'll ever make, right? From the head to the heart. Because what we do is we start to activate and we start to come from a heart coherence is what we start to do. Now, I'll quickly go through the quote here, but love one another as I have loved you. So the green stage, it awakens our empathy, equality, like we respect each other, we care for each other, we understand that people have got different paths and different choices, and that's all a-okay. Because once we start to tap into this consciousness, we realize that, my life is my story and your life is your story. So I don't impede my story onto you and vice versa, because we realize that we didn't all come here together and we're not all going together. It's kind of we've dropped in and out at different times, right? To have experiential experiences to go through. So as the heart expands, what it does is when it expands, it really allows us to move from our ego. It can help us find our tribe, but it can also maybe move us away from tribes that we're in. So we start to find places where we're more heart aligned, where we can feel it. And I'm sure you've had plenty of people the last few years that you've met. You've probably known them for a year or two and you feel like you've known them forever. Most people that I know for I'm Awakening is 100% on that one there. So what's vital here is that an open heart also needs to be a healed heart as well too, because it's hard to open up if we've got, hurt, we've got pain, we've got suffering that we need to work through. So it's really vital for what I'm about to show you when we go into tier two. So a good embodiment is to practice compassion actively. Love definitely dissolves separation. But what's also really important for me to highlight at the moment is we've kind of been at the point where we are at the moment, yeah, because things do repeat themselves. This isn't the first time that we're here. From my beliefs, I don't believe in the Darwinism and the rest of it. But where we've got to be super mindful at the moment is that we're kind of at a fork, is where we are. And the fork will either be that we will be heart led or will be technology led. Now, being aware that they're polar opposites, right? Because technology can't feel emotions and the heart is feeling the emotions. So as a collective consciousness and as humanity at the moment, it's something that we've got to be aware of. So as I tell people, use technology, especially if it allows you the opportunity to focus more onto your spiritual growth, your consciousness growth. Absolutely try and, minimize the technology, which will come to the best that you can. But be aware that's where we are as a collective right now. We're at a crossroad, and it's going to be really interesting. And it's only us as the collective, all of us, all 9 billion souls here at the moment as a collective, that will choose that path as to where we go. Now, another thing is I'm about to show you these next three, the 7, 8, 9. I want you to be aware that where we currently are at the moment when Jesus came, it's like Jesus came and unlocked these 9 codes, but it's taken us time for all of us souls to get to the ability to even tap into 7, 8, 9. I think I'd find it very rare. I was talking with Steve McDonald, who's an absolute expert around ECLEP models. He was here yesterday and again here today. And it'd be very hard to believe if many people are much further than, a 7. There's probably a lot of people. It's definitely something that I know that I've been feeling for a while, making their way. Because when we go from tier 6 to tier 7, stage 6 to stage 7. So we're going from a tier 1, stage 6 to a stage 7 in a tier 2, we have this massive quantum jump. So what that quantum jump means is that it means that we can embody things more. So we start to activate not just the organs that we've got within the body, but like your soul around you. You might know it as your aura is probably a good way to explain it at the moment. But that light body field around you starts to activate. And as that activate, well, obviously it draws different things in. You're in tune to different things. You see things differently, you feel things differently, you hear things differently. And we are absolutely at a stage right now where over the next couple of years, a lot of people will move from six to seven, like a lot. There'll be people that it even happens to that probably aren't even aware what's going on, and they'll be spinning out is exactly what they'll be doing. And that's really, I guess why I do what I do, and people in the awakening space do that at the moment because we know what's coming, right? So so we're in tier two now in the Eclat on stage seven. And in John, it says, I am the father of one. So this is when we really start to integrate. So this is the integrative stage. It sees patterns and it sees unity. So it understands that we all are one. Kind of in the lower tiers, it's a bit like things happen to us. And then, from one to three, things sort of happen to us as our attitude. From three to six, it's a little bit like things happen for us because as things happen, they become teachers and we can learn from it. And then when you kind of go seven, eight, nine, it's more that things are happening through us, or through you, I should say, or through me, through each one of us, right? So the opposites kind of reconcile. We no longer see black and white. We really just see everything as grey once we come into tier two. The truth becomes fluid. It becomes quite spacious. And a good embodiment here is the thinking, in systems, not in sides. And unity, we're definitely feeling that around the world at the moment. Unity includes complexity, right? So it can be hard to find unity um, because sometimes we have to get out of our own way. We might have to change some other beliefs within it. But when we come into that tier two is when we start to become very aware, like very, very, very aware. You can also probably say that once you kind of enter this space, you can sort of bring your stage six, which is really around about, community support, community, looking after, being community involved. Philanthropy is a big part within that. Charities and things like that some of you guys might be familiar with is big. Tier five is kind of the success. Once we kind of, sorry, stage five, once we come into the tier two, it's almost like we can bring five and six together. So we can actually kind of be a part of community, look after community, be philanthropists, do things, be successful in business or in our own personal achievements, family, friends, sports, whatever it might be, academics, anything like that. And it also brings us to, we can also come together as well too. Like if we're all in that tier two, well, it allows us all you can pretty well say that the divide kind of ends at that point. Yeah. So it's not, we don't have these debates about Australia Day as an example. We don't have debates around about did you do it or didn't you do it? Or who do you believe? Is it left wing? Is it right wing? That kind of stuff just, disappears. The living whole is when we go to tier eight, or sorry, stage eight. I keep saying tiers, stage eight on tier two. As John says, that may all be one. So this consciousness experiences life as an interwoven whole. So at this point, when we reach that, just like Jesus did, the self and the cosmos are not separate, So as above, so below. This is where things like this, like moon cycles and things, you become aware of moon cycles. You're aware that the moon's energy affects your energy. You're aware other people's energies can affect, but it's more the cosmos is where you start to bring that in. For anybody that's, done natal charts and things and knows a little bit around about their birth time and, their star seed, people that are into star seeding, definitely astrology and the rest of it, I think you'll probably understand a little bit what I'm talking about. And that's again when we talk around about stage eight. So you're not separate from life. When you come into the nine, it's the embodied transcendence. So, as Matthew says, he is not here, for he is risen. So, what this is the full integration of the spiral. So, this is what Jesus came here to do. He came here, and think of it like again, I was saying memberships. You kind of have a membership to each one of those stages, but they're memberships for life. So, you might go up and you might come down. But what Jesus actually done when he came here as the light being that was carrying multiple souls, really, to be honest, unlocked all those nine levels. So it gave us the ability to access and work through those spiral dynamics. So that's the full integration of the spiral. So Christ really revealed what fully awakened humanity looks like. That's what it was. And as JC Yeshua would said it himself, that no different to any one of us, he just was the one that come here to show us, just to encourage us to participate in this. So when we get to this point, I don't know fully. I can imagine what it might feel like. Logically, I can kind of understand it, but I'd be telling you BS if I told you I'd already embodied that because that's not the case at all. But it's definitely something where, we can become so activated and so light. And this is when I was saying a bit about Jesus, that glowing character, that light body, because there is no emotions, there's no karma, there's no guilt, there's no shame, there's just love, there's just truth, it's just living on pure love. So a good embodiment practice that I struggle with this a bit, but really try and put at the forefront is live without clinging to identity, is a good one here. Because a awakened being can't be threatened. Yeah, you can't be threatened when you're an awakening being. So let me move into sort of the next part of this presentation now. So every awakening has a wilderness, yeah? As Matthew says, then was Jesus led up to the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted of the devil. So the wilderness was not punishment, it was actually preparation, is what it was. So every stage of growth, like the ones I just showed you, requires integration, and integration requires space. It's definitely something that I'm going through in my personal life at the moment, and it's not a problem. I absolutely love it, but I need to create the space to integrate what's going through me at the minute. So before expansion, we must retreat. Before the authority, there's definitely a refinement. And the wilderness is where illusions surfaces and identity clarifies. And I put my hand on my heart, and I'm sure many people are aware, in those moments of silence, that's when we really do find our clarity. Yeah, the illusion does disappear. So a good embodiment practice is notice where life is inviting you to step back before you step forward. You might be in that position like I am at the moment. I really would like to step forward, but I'm aware I need to step back. I've got to embody what these changes that I'm going through consciously. So retreat, again, reveals clarity. Now, purification through subtraction. And when he had fasted 40 days and 40 nights, he was afterwards and hungered. So, as what we talk about here is fasting, again, going back to when Jesus done his 40 days, 40 nights, the fasting strips away dependency. The hunger really exposed the attachments, and the body became honest, when comfort is removed. So, an embodiment here is to remove noise to try and reclaim your attention again, yeah. And when you reclaim your attention, then you can start to give that attention or that energy to other things that matter, yeah. So it's not like you're pulling back on something, you're almost redirecting it, but a good place is to redirect it on yourself at the moment. So clarity definitely follows subtraction when we remove the noise. Now, the ego bargaining. But he answered and said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God. So temptation comes in all the time. Pick up the phone, doing a scroll, go and have a snack to eat, go and have a drink, go down and go down to the horse track with the boys, like whatever it might be. Temptation is the ego offering shortcuts. Yeah, what it does is it promises comfort, but in exchange it takes our consciousness. So temptation takes our consciousness by giving us comfort. Unfortunately, it's important to have stillness, to rest, to wind, but we should always be progressively moving with our consciousness. So just notice where comfort may control you at times. Freedom requires discipline, like absolutely it does. To really be free, we must have discipline upon ourselves. Yeah. What I quite often say to people is, especially when we encounter other people's, to be patient with others, but to be disciplined with ourselves. Like it's really important that we hold that just discipline to ourselves. So returning with authority. And Jesus returned in the power of the Spirit into Galilee. So after he went for his 40 days and 40 nights, he came back. Now, the desert didn't weaken him. It refined him, right? The withdrawal produced clarity and also authority. So he could really step into who he was, knew who he was, and he used it as a great example for others. So the embodiment I say here is similar to a few slides ago, that trust the process of stepping back sometimes, because we must step back to integrate before we can step forward. And in my belief, I think this is where a lot of us can go wrong, is that we have these consciousness growths, but we don't allow the time or the process to embody it. We don't give the time to embed that, to really hold that, to really carry that. Because when we are giving it that time, we're allowing it to grow. Well, that's when we start to activate. Again, I'll use the aura for this in this regard, but this is when we start to activate our field as well too. Yeah. And this is when we can start to draw better things into our life, higher vibrational things into our life. So strength follows stillness. Now, a world addicted to noise. So, as Hosea says, therefore, behold, I will lure her and bring her into the wilderness and speak comfortably unto her. Now, every generation is called to its own desert. Yeah, we're not living in the Middle East, so we don't have our desert. But today, the wilderness is the removal of stimulation of the nervous system. We must have a relaxed nervous system. Quite often, that phone in front of our face, the screens in front of, even people just talking all the time, it's still vibrations that are coming at us. Even the music to a degree. As much as I love music, it can be overstimulating at times. Yeah. So, an embodiment practice here is to choose quiet in a loud culture, and the desert still calls. Protecting our attention. Good one here that Jesus said. So, if thy right eye offend thee, then pluck it out. For it is profitable for thee that one of thy members should perish, and not that thy whole body should be cast into hell. So literally, Jesus was just being straight when he said this. He did use, pretty aggressive or extreme language to teach a simple truth. Remove what destroys awareness. That's the bottom line of that scroll. Like, remove what destroys awareness. It is that simple. So one thing that I encourage for people, one thing that I've been doing recently, and it has been an absolute game changer for me, was to practice digital discipline, because it's so easy to get sucked in because our attention is sacred. Yeah. And I'm sure anyone that's heard me speak before, I quite often would hold a phone and say, don't eat the apple from the tree, right? And nothing really changed. I still have that perception. So, embodied worship. I beseech you, therefore, present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God. So be aware that the body isn't separate from spirituality. So we need to care for that vessel as well too, because the care for the vessel is the care for the spirit. Those that have heard me speak before, I talk a lot about a car and a car driver. So, you could say the spirit would be the car driver and then the body would be the car. We need to make sure we look after the car so then the driver can get where it needs to get to, right? So care for the body the way that you'll care for a sanctuary, because embodiment really is worship. Now, the voice beneath the noise, as said in Kings 1, and after the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire, and after the fire, a still small voice. So God is not found in spectacle, God is I am that I am. So it's everywhere, right? But it's not found in spectacle. Revelation hides it quiet. So the nervous system must soften before truth is heard. And this is a big challenge that we have. For those that know, I used to work a fair bit a long time ago in mental health as an example. And the biggest thing that we see with any mental health challenges that people are having is that the nervous system is just not in sync. It's too there's too much stimulation going on within the nervous system. So the nervous system must soften, but before truth is heard. And for myself, I found Carnabossum exceptional to soften the nervous system. And Carnabossum was actually something that I really, it's Carnabossum means cannabis plant in Hebrew. It's something which was in the Hebrew Bible, the books of Torah. Was also in the Ethiopian Bible. And one of my beliefs is that I believe that absolutely Carnabossum was being used for people to be able to access, to be able to keep the nervous system calm, so they could actually access the voice beneath the noise. Yeah. So they could actually get to know thyself, and they could also know thy collective conscious. They could know God. So silence is where God becomes audible. Really good books. If anybody's looking for some good recommendations on books, there's some great books. I forget the author at the moment, but Conversations with God, really good ones. And it really comes from people being in silence, taking the time, and then they hear God. Yeah. But without the stillness, we don't get that. We don't get the message. Now, awakening move outwards, inasmuch as ye have done it unto one, or of the least of these, my brethren, ye have done it unto me. What this is saying is awakening is not escape. It expresses itself as a service, is what it does. So we kind of retract as we integrate and we embody, but then we act as a service. So as consciousness matures, it matures when compassion becomes action. So a good embodiment for this here is to go and serve someone without being seen. Yeah. Love must move. And this is very much where people that, in that tier 6 will start to really understand this. Community of the awake. So finishing up here, getting towards the tail end, guys. And all that believe were together and had all things common. So the early Ecclesia was not an institute. Even the old Ecclesia is still not an institute, right? It's a living field of shared consciousness. Now, when Jesus came down to say there are there's other ways that we can connect with God. We don't need institutes because we've moved from that. So we're moving from stage four. We're evolving, and that's really the purpose for all of us. Even God, it's always evolving, right? Continually evolving. So when he came down, and what he was trying to do was trying to get people to come back to the consciousness, to awaken within, awaken with everybody, and then collectively move. Obviously, might go into conspiracies and the rest of it. Some conspiracies are conspiracies. Some have got a lot of truth into it as well. But we've been spending too much time looking out for this, right? So what we need to do is we need to embody the ecclesia. So you are the ecclesia, like I'm the ecclesia, yeah? And my embodiment practice that I would say to people here is build relationships that are rooted in truth, not performance, not just relationships with people, but relationship with yourself as well too, right? Awakening really is collective. And anyone that's heard me speak the last 5 years, all through COVID and all the rest of it, you will know the only thing I ever say is the only way that this ends is if we all raise our consciousness, period. And I'm not telling you that I'm Jesus, but I'm just repeating the same thing that he was trying to say 2000 years ago. Nothing's changed. We haven't evolved as a consciousness from there. Now, another thing that Jesus was talking about is participation, not observation. And he says unto them, follow me, and I will make you fishers of men. So Jesus never asked for admiration. Do you want to be praised? There was none of that. He was literally one of the boys, one of the coolest dudes that you would ever come across, right? But he did ask for participation, similar to kind of what I'm about to ask you guys in a moment, but conscious participation, yeah? So the path is walked, it's not studied, yeah? This is where a lot of the time wisdom can go, information go wrong because to have wisdom, we need to take information and then we need to put it into practice. It needs to be experimental. I can never get that right? Experiential is what it needs to be, yeah? And that's when we turn information into wisdom, right? So my embodiment here is to take a step instead of waiting for certainty, yeah? And you're invited to walk. Identity is reborn. So I am crucified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live, yet not I, but Christ liveth in me. The fast was not self-destruction in any way, shape, or form when Jesus went for his 40 days and his 40 nights. It was just an ego refinement, a new identity emerges from silence. So when we allow the old self to when we allow our old self to not guard where we're going, when we allow it to sort of loosen its grip, well, this is when we can move through progressions of change, and this is when we can move through tiers of consciousness as well. So as we lose an identity, and I've probably had quite a few identities in my life over the years, and it can be a little bit confusing when you're not the trainer, when you're not the mental health person, and whatever it may have been that I was in. Even as you step into new identities, when you start to work more with awakening and public foundations and community events and things like that. But understand that it's just like the snake that sheds its skin, yeah. And sometimes we need to allow the space and the time to shed that skin so we can evolve, so our soul can evolve, our consciousness evolves. And then in turn, not just individually, but we all do that together, yeah? So you always return change. Now carry the light. Then Jesus said to them again, peace be upon you, as my Father hath sent me, even so send I you. So what this is about is exactly what I'm telling you now, is it really just means that awakening's not private, and those that see clearly need to help others see, right? That's the point. And again, go back to the start. We can never tell anybody what to think, but what we can do is we can show things. And if it's the right time for people and if it's the right connection, then people can engage. So curiosity is a good thing. So awakening is never private. Once you awaken, as I'm sure most of you may be aware, you start to help other people awaken as well too, right? Now, embodiment, living in a way that invites awakening in others. Yeah. So be the example. As I like to say, inspire one, inspire many, be the inspiration because you become the message. People start to see it. And I'm sure you know plenty of people like this that you can see the light within them. They carry the light. They come into a room, they're going to light the whole room up. Their energy is incredible. Yeah. So you know that they're awakened. You know that that's where they're at. Now, remember the kingdom. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field. So the journey actually ends where it began. So nothing was added, it was only remembered. And that's what I was saying at the start earlier when we jumped in on this webinar, was that if I say some things that they start to resonate,
you're not actually really learning anything new. You're just remembering things because you're just going back through your awakening process again. Yeah. So it's things that you already know, that your soul already knows, that the collective consciousness already knows, and you're just resurfing it again. So live remembering, and I cannot encourage it much enough that you are the ecclesia, just like I am the ecclesia. We are the ecclesia. Together we are. We are the called out ones. As Matthew, when written in Matthew, you are the light of the world. That's us. We all are the light of the world. Yeah. Ecclesia was never a building. It was the people, the awakened, the embodied, and the alive. Yeah. You are the field where consciousness rises. That's who we all are. That's what we all are. We are God expressing, it's expressing itself. Yeah. So from understanding to embodiment, information does not transform. So information doesn't transform, like I just said. Participation does. So having the experience of it. And this is what Jesus was encouraging just through his walk of life. Awakening definitely requires experience because we need to feel it. We need to go through it. We need to embody it. So my embodiment to you guys, if you're up for it, would be to join the I am 4040 disconnect to reconnect, where wisdom is lived. It's pretty straightforward, guys. It's completely free as well too. The IM 4040 is something which I designed around, the desert not being a punishment, but a preparation. Now, we don't have the desert like we used to, but we absolutely do have overstimulation in so many ways. So I would encourage anybody, whether it's now or whether it's later, it's just on the website and I'll show you, you can access it at any point that you like. I'm going to encourage you all to remove some distractions from your life. Remove those distractions of where that energy might go that doesn't serve you. Technology is a big one. That's a big one that's really, it's affecting all of us at the moment. Absolutely. If there's places where you're putting your energy where you know it doesn't serve them, pull it back. Remove those distractions. Yeah. Get your attention back. So reclaim your attention. I honestly cannot stress enough that we are in such a beautiful time that people can it's almost like there's a little window where you can just fast track your consciousness right now, like absolutely fast track your progression. You can fast track right up into a quantum leap. And that's because the whole collective, all of us, but then there's also Earth as a living being too, right? So Earth has got a consciousness. So Earth is working as well. So we can move with the energy of Earth as Earth raises its consciousness, starts to shift where it is now. The chakras of Earth will start to shift. But I encourage you to, for 40 days and 40 nights, to remove distraction, reclaim your attention, and return to your presence. Begin your journey with presence, like literally just being present. If you would like to do this, this is the moment where you can kind of go between understanding and embodiment. Now, there's heaps of ways you can do this, right? This is just something, if it appeals to you, then great. You can go just to the website, imawakener.com.au. You'll see at the top, there's a tab now that says I am 4040. Just put your details, which will just be your name and your email, and that'll just put you into a trigger list. You'll get a welcome email, which will just give you a couple of thoughts from myself around about things that you might, abstain from some of those distractions and things that you might include into your life, some things that you might replace into your life, and you'll begin your 40-day journey. And once that email goes in, how it works is that you've basically got like a 24-hour window to prep yourself up. And you get your welcome email, and then you get about a 24-hour window. So your first email will start just after 24 hours. So there's a 24-hour window. I hope I'm making sense when I say this. A 24-hour window before your first email will start. And they'll always go out at 7 a.m. That's Eastern time, Sydney time, AEDT or AEST. And in each one of those emails every day, there's an email where I've just broken down some more scripture. I've broken down the scripture. I've given you a couple of things that may help you be reflective to where you're at, a couple of practices. And in all honesty, guys, I don't think it would take anyone any longer than 2 to 3 minutes to read each one of these emails, but it may give you some good guidance. It may give you some structure. It may assist you on your journey because it really, stillness, silence, allowing things to progress. The 40 days and the 40 nights, I think, is an incredible thing that we could all look at, and we should all look at, whether now's the time or not. But it's something where we can reclaim some of our attention back because I tell you what, you must be spinning around as much as what I am at times, where there's so much news, so many stories, so many things to worry about. It's just so bloody distracting. The moment you can remove that distraction, then you can find yourself. Now, that invitation is open to everybody. I will just say that you can access it whenever you like. I will just say as well, too, guys, that how I've structured it, and you do it how you want to do it, right? This is about you. It's all about you. But how I did structure it and how I've done it, and I'm going through it, I'm going through this, I'm about halfway through at the moment, is I actually started with having my last supper at an 8 p.m. one evening. And then I actually did fast just from food for 40 hours. I had like a water fast for 40 hours. So I had my last supper on a Wednesday night. Yeah, it was a Wednesday night at 8 p.m. I just water fasted all the next day. And then at midday the following day, which was the Friday, that's when I began to eat again. But what I wanted to do is I really wanted to have a bridge that was like, right, I'm doing this. I need to get up to it. I'm going to need to get off a good start. So I've done the 40-hour water fast, but the whole 40 and 40 disconnect, reconnect, guys, is really around about just your attention. It's not a fast from food, but you may make some different choices, along the ways. So I welcome anybody who's watching that wants to do that, then you are absolutely welcome. And I will just finish up because I know that I've gone a couple minutes over and I'm mindful of everybody's time. But we've explored a lot. Like I've spoke a lot, as I always do. I probably should have done 90 minutes and not rushed it into 60, but we've spoken about it a lot. We've spoken about the spiral. We've spoken about the stages. We've spoken around about what Jesus came here to unlock. We've spoken around about, where we currently are as a society, where we're actually moving into that tier six with the opportunity for people to quantum leap into that tier two, into that stage two. I just encourage you guys to, take anything that served you here this evening or this afternoon, anything that didn't, then just leave it. I myself am actually going to do the other 40 hours again. So I'm going to jump on the website. I'm going to put my details in again so I get my emails through because I didn't do them with the emails before. And tomorrow night at 8 p.m., I'll have my last meal and I'll fast through. And if anybody wants to join me, then please do. I'll obviously see who's in there. If I can assist anyone in the journey, then please reach out. If anybody does do it, then great. If it's not for you, then awesome as well too. No stress. But anybody that does do it, that would want to share anything with me along the way, just know that I'm here to be a mirror, on that journey. I can help you understand things to the best that I know, guys, know that, and I can be a bit of a wingman that goes through the process. And I think that people would enjoy it if they'd done that. So please, again, guys, take what you want to take from tonight. I will just leave it, just open up just for a couple of minutes. If anybody does have any questions, then feel free to punch them through. But it is, 10 past 8 where I am at the moment. I'm aware that people have got things to do. So if there is no questions that come through, I hope I've made sense. I hope I didn't confuse anyone too much. And please reach out if you would like to chat or discuss anything about Jesus, consciousness, or the Ekklesia. And with that, guys, thank you very much for being here. Bless you all. And I'll see you all later. Thank you.